Picture a Greek poet nearly 3,000 years ago standing on a cliff at dawn. He is about to describe the sea. He has done it before hundreds of times in some of the greatest poetry ever written, and the word he reaches for is not blue. It is not even close. He calls the sea wine dark. Read that again, the wine dark sea. Homer, the man who gave us the Iliad and the Odyssey, described the ocean the color of red wine. He called oxen wine dark too. He called honey green. He called the sky bronze and iron, but almost never blue. In tens of thousands of lines across two enormous poems, the most poetic observer of the ancient world never once clearly named the color of the sky above him. So here's the question. Was something wrong with Homer's eyes, or was something different about his world? The answer reaches much further than one blind poet. It reaches into your own mind right now. The first person to really notice this was not a scientist. He was a politician. In 1858, a British statesman named William Gladstone, who would go on to become prime minister 4 times, spent his spare hours obsessively reading Homer. Gladstone was a careful man. He counted things. And as he counted the color words in Homer, he found something deeply strange. Black appears nearly 200 times, white around 100, red fewer than 15, yellow and green a handful each, and blue? Blue does not appear at all. Gladstone wondered if the ancient Greeks were simply colorblind. But then other scholars started checking other ancient texts, and the pattern held everywhere. A philologist named Lazarus Geiger, a man who studied the history of languages, picked up the thread a few years later. He combed through ancient writing from across the world, old Icelandic sagas, ancient Chinese tales, Hindu Vedic hymns, the original Hebrew of the Bible, and he found the same gap again and again. These cultures described the earth and the sky in loving detail. They wrote about the heavens constantly, and not one of them, in their oldest texts, had a word for blue. Think about how odd that is. Blue is the color of the daytime sky. It is arguably the most present color in human life, and yet it is almost always the last color a language names. Geiger noticed something else. Color words seem to enter languages in a fixed order. First, a language has words for dark and light, black and white. Then, always next, comes red. Then yellow and green arrive, in some order. And blue is almost always last to be named, if it gets named at all. Why red first? The likely answer is wonderfully human. Red is the color of blood. Red is the color of fire. Red matters for survival, so red gets a name early. But blue? In nature, true blue is astonishingly rare. There are almost no blue animals. Blue flowers are uncommon. There is no blue food. The sky is blue and the deep sea is blue, but you cannot hold the sky in your hand. You cannot point at it and say, that one, that exact color, like this berry or that wound. And a color you cannot point to is a hard color to name. So here is where the story turns from history into something stranger, because a missing word raises a haunting possibility. If a culture has no word for blue, can the people in it even see it? Now hold on. Their eyes worked exactly like yours. The human eye has not changed in the few thousand years since Homer. The cells in your retina that catch blue light, the cones, were firing in his eyes too. Physically, he saw the same wavelength bouncing off the same sea. So this is not about the eye. This is about something happening one step later, in the mind. To test this, we have to leave the ancient world and travel to northern Namibia, to a people called the Himba. The Himba are a modern people with a traditional language, and their language carves up color very differently from English. They have no single word that means blue the way we mean it, but they have many precise words for shades of green that, to an English speaker, look identical. A researcher named Jules Davidoff ran an experiment that has become famous. He showed Himba volunteers a circle made of 12 squares. 11 of the squares were the same green. One square was a clear, obvious blue. To you and me, that blue square jumps out instantly. It is the easiest task in the world. The Himba volunteers struggled. Many took a long time. Some pointed to the wrong square entirely. The blue did not leap out at them because their language did not hand them a box labeled blue to drop it into. But then Davidoff flipped the test. He showed them the same circle of green squares, except this time one of the greens was very slightly different. A shade so close that most English speakers cannot find it at all. We stare and see 12 identical squares. The Himba, who have separate words for those greens, spotted the odd one almost instantly. Let that sink in. The language you speak does not change the light entering your eyes, but it appears to change what your mind notices, sorts, and remembers. It sharpens some differences and blurs others. This idea has a name. It is often called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, after two linguists, Edward Sapir and Benjamin Lee Whorf, who argued in the early 20th century that the language we speak shapes the thoughts we are able to think. For decades, the strong version of that idea was dismissed as romantic nonsense. Surely thought comes first, and words just label it. But color turned out to be the crack in the wall. In 1969, two researchers, Brent Berlin and Paul Kay, mapped color words across more than 90 languages and confirmed that strange fixed-order Geiger had glimpsed a century earlier. The pattern was real. The words were not random, And the Himba experiments suggested the words were doing something to perception itself. So let's go back to that cliff at dawn. Back to Homer. He is not colorblind. His eyes are flooded with the same blue that floods yours. But his language has handed him no jar to pour that blue into. So his mind reaches for the words he does have. Words about brightness and darkness and the shimmer of light on a moving surface. The sea is dark and glittering and alive, like wine swirling in a cup. So he calls it what it feels like to him. Wine dark. And to him, that is not a mistake. That is simply the sea. The blue was always there. He just had no door to walk through to reach it. And now think about what this means for you. Right now, you are seeing a world sorted into the boxes your language gave you. Somewhere out there are distinctions you walk past every single day without noticing. Not because you cannot see them, but because no one ever handed you the word that would make them snap into focus. Other languages slice the world along lines you have never imagined. There are tongues with a dozen words for textures of snow, for states of rice, for kinds of love. We tend to believe that we see the world and then we describe it. But the truth seems to run at least partly the other way. The words come first quietly and they decide what rises into view. So the next time you stand at the edge of the ocean and the word blue arrives in your mind before you even think it, pause for a moment. That word is not just a label, it is a lens handed to you by everyone who spoke your language before you were born. Homer stood at that same edge, looking at the same water, and saw something we will never quite see. A wine-dark sea.